I'm 32 now, and I haven't spoken to my parents in over a year, and honestly, I don't think I ever will again. And before anyone jumps into the comments calling me ungrateful or dramatic, let me walk you through exactly how we got here. Because if you told 19-year-old me that one day I'd be cutting off my entire family just to breathe, I would have laughed in your face. But here we are. I grew up in what people love to call a traditional household, meaning, dad worked, mom cooked, and I was the responsible firstborn who didn't make trouble, didn't talk back, and handled things, while my sister, 3 years younger, kind of just did whatever the hell she wanted, and got away with it because she's still a kid even when she was 22, and I was expected to set the example, to lead, to sacrifice, to understand, always. Our parents weren't cruel or abusive or anything like that. They just had these invisible expectations that weren't negotiable, like if something needed to be done, I'd do it, no questions, no complaints, while my sister needed time to figure things out, which basically meant she floated around, flaked on stuff, and when it blew up in her face, somehow it became a team effort to save her from her own mess, and that dynamic started early and never stopped. When I was 18, my parents bought a small apartment in the city, not for themselves but to rent it out for the kids later, and the plan, as I understood it, was to save up for a second one eventually, so both me and my sister would have somewhere to go when we were ready, fair and square. But here's the thing, I didn't ask for it, I didn't expect it, I just knew it existed and figured, cool, that's a future safety net. But I still worked my ass off anyway. I got into a decent university, commuted, worked part-time as a tutor, paid for my own books, helped out at home, never asked for money unless I was desperate, and when I graduated, I got lucky with a good entry-level job and just kept grinding, got promoted twice, saved like hell, met a girl I loved, she got pregnant, fast, wasn't planned, but we stepped up, got married, figured life out together, and around that time, my parents gave me the key to that apartment, said it was time to stop paying rent and start building my own family, and I was beyond grateful. I thanked them like 5 times, promised I'd treat the place like it was mine, and I did. Meanwhile my sister was in college, but that mostly meant she was taking sporadic classes, switching majors every 6 months, going on spiritual retreats, and self-care weekends she somehow couldn't afford but always went on anyway. And then one night at dinner, big family meal, cousins in town, full house, she starts going on and on about how hard college is, how drained she is from giving 110%, and how much pressure there is on women to have it all. And my wife politely asks, "What are you studying now?" And my sister says, "Still psychology, but maybe transferring to communications." And then out of nowhere she drops, "But I'm not going to make the same mistake some girls do, getting pregnant before I even start my career. That's just throwing your whole future away." And I swear to God the room went silent, because my wife, who was 7 months pregnant at the time, just stared at her like she'd been slapped. And I said, "Are you serious right now?" And my sister's like, "What? I didn't mean you." And my wife goes, "Then who exactly did you mean?" And it turned into a full-on scene, my sister doubling down, saying she wants more than just being a mom, and my wife asking if that makes her less, and me trying to keep the peace while also not letting that shit slide. And finally my mom steps in, does her whole soft voice mediator act, "Let's all calm down, we're family." And my dad says nothing, just keeps eating. And later that night, my wife cried in the car, said she felt judged and humiliated, and I told her she wasn't wrong. Because that was the moment I realized my sister didn't just get more chances, she got to spit on ours too, and still be treated like the golden one. So about 6 months after that dinner, after that little, not about you, moment that still makes my wife's face go cold every time someone mentions my sister, we're just living our lives, adjusting to life with a newborn, running on 3 hours of sleep, juggling diapers, formula, and the kind of exhaustion that makes you forget your own name, and just trying to keep things stable. Money's tight, time's tighter, but we're doing it, one day at a time. And then my mom calls and says, "Your sister has some news." And at that point I already knew what it was, because she'd been quieter than usual, posting cryptic crap on Instagram like, "Life is full of surprises," and "Sometimes the hardest path leads to the best destination," or whatever. And yeah, surprise, she's pregnant, 2 months along, not planned, not married, still no degree, still no job, and somehow everyone's acting like this is just one of those things that happens. Like, oh well, life throws curveballs, and I kept my mouth shut. Because I know how it sounds coming from me. I know I look bitter even when I'm just breathing. But then the wedding planning starts, and it's not even low-key. It's a full backyard production at my parents' house, rented tent, catering, DJ, and guess who's footing most of it? Not the groom. Not her. And definitely not me. Because I wasn't even asked, which I appreciated in the moment, but later realized was just another symptom of how differently we're treated, like I was expected to earn my milestones, and she was expected to be celebrated for surviving her own chaos. And the day of the wedding, I'll be honest, I tried, I showed up, brought my wife, we smiled, we clapped, we even got her a damn gift, and for most of the night I stayed out of the way, just keeping it civil, and then during dinner, I don't even remember what triggered it. Someone made a joke about how fast everything was happening for her, and she snapped, made this loud comment like, "At least I didn't trap someone with a baby just to get a ring," and I froze, because that was aimed directly at me and my wife, and I looked at her and said, "What the hell is wrong with you?" And she goes, "Oh, come on, we all know you rushed everything because you were scared." And my wife's face just drops, like she's trying to decide whether to throw a glass or cry, and I say, "You really want to do this at your wedding?" And she stands up and says, "You've always thought you were better than me, just because you did things the right way." And I said, "No, I thought I was better because I didn't expect everyone else to clean up after me." And the whole tent goes quiet, people staring. My mom rushes over, whisper yelling, "Enough," and tries pulling her aside. And my dad finally opens his mouth, not to stop her, but to ask me to apologize to her, because she's hormonal, and it's her day. And I just nodded, walked away from the table, and spent the rest of the evening helping my wife stay calm while my family pretended nothing happened. And that was the night something in me clicked off, like a switch flipped, and I realized no matter what she did, no matter how far she went, I'd always be the one expected to stay composed, to be the example, to understand, and honestly, I was so tired of it. After the baby was born, life became a blur. Diapers, doctor visits, sleepless nights, microwaved coffee, bills stacked like Jenga. And we were tired, broke, and barely holding it together, but we were doing it, side by side, in that little apartment I was so damn grateful for, because without it, we'd be drowning. And then, right as we were starting to breathe again, I got a text from my dad, asking if we could come over to talk, and that's never a good sign. But we went anyway, strapped the baby in the car seat and drove over, expecting maybe a family dinner or something. But when we got there, it was just my parents, sitting in the living room like they'd rehearsed something, and my mom said, "This is hard for us," and my stomach immediately dropped, and my dad said, "Your sister and her husband are struggling right now, financially," and I said, "Okay, what does that have to do with us?" And they looked at each other and then said it. They wanted us to move out of the apartment, my apartment, so she and her husband could move in, just for a while, just until they got on their feet, and I swear I laughed, because I thought it was a joke. Like maybe they were testing me, and I said, "You're not serious," and my mom said, "We never meant for one child to have more than the other," and I said, "You gave me that apartment," and my dad cut in, "We gave you the key." It was still under our name, and it hit me like a brick to the face. Nothing was really mine, and maybe it never was, and I asked, "So where am I supposed to go? With a newborn?" And they said, "You're doing well now, you'll figure it out," and gave us 2 weeks to move out. 2 weeks, with a newborn. And my mom even added, "We'll help you pack and move if you need," like that made it better, like offering to help push us out the door somehow softened the blow. And I told them no. I didn't want anything from them, and we drove home that night in silence, my wife crying in the car, me just staring at the road, running numbers in my head, already dreading what was coming. And the next morning I got to work, spent the next 2 weeks scrambling, viewing shitty rentals, making desperate calls, begging landlords for flexibility, and somehow I landed a small place way out of the way. But it was clean and safe and I made it work. And when moving day came, we packed everything ourselves and left without asking for a single box or ride. And I didn't even get a thank you, just a text from my mom that said, "You did the right thing," like I was supposed to feel proud instead of gutted, like I was being praised for donating a kidney. And I tried to let it go. I really did. I told myself they were trying, that maybe they just didn't know how to handle fairness, that maybe my sister really did need help, and I almost started to believe that, until one night a couple months later, my cousin called and asked if it was true that the apartment had been signed over to my sister permanently, and I said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "Uncle John mentioned it at the barbecue last week," and I called my mom and asked straight up, "Is the apartment still under your name?" And she hesitated for 1 second too long and said, "It's better this way, less paperwork," and that was it. Confirmation that they had given it to her, officially, quietly, while I was still adjusting to being a first-time dad in a rented 2-bedroom at the edge of town. And it didn't stop there. Turns out my dad had hired her husband, brought him into the family business, made him his assistant. Even though the guy couldn't run a spreadsheet if his life depended on it, and was paying him a full salary while I was out here clipping coupons and running numbers at 2 a.m. to make sure we could buy formula and keep the lights on. And that's when the shift happened in my head, when all the stories I told myself about equal love and temporary help just died. Because it wasn't temporary, and it sure as hell wasn't equal. They had picked her, like they always had, and I had spent my entire adult life being the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who understood, and for what? So they could hand over everything behind my back and call it fairness. By the time we were settled into the new place, I had done everything in my power to stay calm, to not let the rage eat me alive. I worked, I helped with the baby, I kept telling myself we'd build it back up from scratch like we always did, and I didn't go off on my parents or call out my sister because I figured, what's the point? They made their choice, let them live with it. But the thing about people like my sister, they don't just take, they keep taking, because they think they're entitled to whatever you haven't already nailed down. And about a month and a half after we moved, I got a text from her out of nowhere. Hey, I wanted to talk to you about something. Can I call? And I already had a bad feeling in my gut, but I answered anyway, stupidly thinking maybe it was an apology, or at least some acknowledgement of the situation. But no, she starts off all fake casual, like, so me and husband have been talking and we're in kind of a tight spot right now. And I'm like, okay. And she goes, it's just hard with the baby and errands and stuff, and dad can't always drive us. And we've been thinking maybe it's time we had a car. And I said, then, buy a car. And she says, well, yeah, but it's not that simple. And since you already had your turn with the apartment and everything, we thought maybe you could help us out with this. Like maybe just give us something reliable, not new, obviously, but not embarrassing either. And I just sat there, stunned, completely silent for a full 10 seconds, before saying, you want me to give you a car? And she goes, well, we're family, right? And I said, exactly. Which is why this is insane. And she got snappy, said I was being dramatic, that it's not like I couldn't afford it. And that's when I lost it. I said, I just got kicked out of the apartment that was supposed to be for both of us. I've been covering rent on a place I didn't plan for with a newborn in the next room, and you think I owe you a fing car? And she actually scoffed and said, wow, so you're just bitter now? And I said, no, I'm done. There's a difference. And I hung up. After that, I didn't hear from her again until the next family gathering, a birthday party for one of our younger cousins at my parents' house. And I didn't want to go, but my wife said, let's just show up, be polite, and leave early. So we did. And as soon as we walked in, I could feel the tension. My sister giving me side eyes, whispering to her husband, being loud and fake friendly with everyone else, but throwing these little jabs across the table like, some people really forget where they came from, and it must be nice to act like you're above helping your family. And I kept my mouth shut for an hour straight, just eating my food, trying not to explode. But then she said something about my daughter, and I didn't even catch the whole thing, just the tone, something like, let's hope she doesn't grow up to be as cold as her dad. And I snapped. I stood up and said, you want to do this now? Really? In front of everyone? And she smiled and said, I'm just saying, you've changed. And I said, no, I've finally stopped pretending. And the room went dead silent, and I turned to my parents and said, you let her take everything. You watched it happen. And you're still okay with this? And my dad said, can we not do this here? And I said, you mean not tell the truth? Sure, that's how we've always done it. And my mom tried to hush us, but I kept going. I said, she manipulates you, she lives off you, and you just let her. While I broke my back trying to earn what little I had, and when I did, you ripped it away and gave it to her like it was a prize for failing. And my dad cut in and said, you lived off us too, you forget that. And I just stared at him, and said, no. I lived in the apartment you said was for both of us. You never paid a bill. Not a single one. You gave me keys, not charity. And he started to say something else. But I pulled out my phone, opened the calculator, typed in the average rent in that area for the years we lived there, added it up month by month, wrote it down in my checkbook right then and there, tore out the check, walked across the room, and handed it to him, and said, here, paid in full. So don't you ever say I lived off you. And I turned to my sister and said, I don't just resent you. I despise you. You're a parasite in designer sneakers. And walked out, wife and baby in tow, while everyone sat there frozen. And as I stepped outside, I heard my dad yell after me, if you leave now, don't bother coming back. And I turned and said, then you just lost your son. And your granddaughter. We drove home in silence that night, my wife holding my hand the whole way, our daughter already asleep in the back, and I could tell she was waiting for me to say something, to fall apart or unload or rant. But I didn't. I just stared at the road like if I blinked too hard, I'd break down. And when we finally got inside, she sat me down and asked if I was okay, and all I said was, "Just leave it," and she nodded, because she knew that look. That numb, heavy stare I get when something finally breaks and there's nothing left to say. And I went to bed that night feeling a kind of quiet I hadn't felt in years. Not peace, not grief, just done. And the next few days I didn't talk to anyone, didn't answer my mom's texts or the 2 missed calls from my sister, didn't tell anyone else in the family what happened, because honestly, I didn't care if they heard her version first. I wasn't playing PR for people who made me feel disposable. And then 3 weeks later, like some cosmic sign, I got pulled into a meeting at work and offered a promotion, bigger role, more responsibility, and a relocation package to open a satellite office in a city 2 hours away. And I said yes on the spot, didn't even ask my wife, because I knew she'd say yes too. And when I told her that night, she just said, "When do we start packing?" No questions, no second thoughts, because that's the kind of partner I married. And within a month we were gone, new city, new apartment, that the company paid for. Thank you very much. And for the first time in years, I wasn't looking over my shoulder, wasn't waiting for someone to ask me to give up something else for someone who never earned it. We enrolled our daughter in a nearby preschool. My wife picked up part-time work in a marketing firm downtown. We met neighbors, found a coffee place we liked, started doing Saturday walks in the park, and slowly, the constant tension in my chest started to fade. And for 6 full months, I didn't speak to my family at all, not a single call, not a text, nothing. Until one day my mom called from a number I didn't recognize, and I picked up because I thought it might be work, and she said, "You're not answering us anymore," and I said, "Correct," and she said, "Your father is still very upset about what happened," and I said, "He's not the only one," and she said, "It's time you apologize, for the sake of the family," and I actually laughed, not a mean laugh, just a wow, you really don't get it laugh, and said, "You want me to apologize to him and to her?" And she said, "Yes. If you come to your senses, your father is willing to forgive you. Your sister too." And I said, "I'm not interested in forgiveness from people who never gave me a fraction of what they handed her." And she said, "You've been gone for months. You don't even come to church anymore. You haven't even driven through the neighborhood." And I said, "That's because I don't live there anymore. We moved. New city. New job. New life." And she was quiet for a moment, and then said, "So that's it? You're just cutting us off?" And I said, "I'm not cutting anyone. I'm just finally choosing myself." And she said, "Your father won't come to you. He says you should be the one to fix it." And I said, "Then I guess he doesn't get to meet his granddaughter again unless he changes his mind." And then I told her, "Here's the deal. If he wants to apologize to me, sincerely, for how he handled everything, and if he evicts my sister from the apartment she stole out from under us, I'll consider a conversation. Until then, don't call me to deliver guilt trips on his behalf. And as for her, she can rot." And I hung up. About 6 months passed after that call with my mom, and we settled fully into our new life. Our daughter loved her preschool. My wife was thriving in her new job. I had a team under me now and actual respect at work. Not just, "You're the guy who doesn't complain." And the best part was the silence. No drama, no guilt, no unexpected family talks, where I'm the adult in a room full of grown-up children pretending I'm the problem. And honestly, I didn't miss a damn thing. Until one evening I got a message from my cousin that just said, "Yo, is it true your dad had to downsize the company?" And I hadn't heard anything. So I replied, "What?" And he told me sales dropped off hard, a few clients pulled out, and your dad laid off like half the floor staff, including 2 people who'd been there over a decade. And I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I didn't feel much at all. Just that same cold sense of course. Because when you prioritize family loyalty over basic competence, that's what happens. And then a few weeks later, I got another update. This time from a former coworker who knew someone in accounting there, and apparently not only had my dad fallen behind on the mortgage for his office space, he was also covering all the bills at the apartment for my sister, including utilities, groceries, phone plans, internet, and even streaming subscriptions. Because God forbid she or her husband make a budget. And the kicker? Her husband had apparently taken out a car loan behind her back to buy a newer model SUV for the baby, even though neither of them had the income to justify it. And now, with the business bleeding and no one to cover their mess, guess what happened? He defaulted, missed 2 payments, got a ticket for speeding and couldn't pay the fine. Boom, car repossessed. No car, no backup, no way to do anything but panic. And that's when she reached out again. Of course, it always comes back around. She called from an unknown number. I didn't pick up, but she left a voicemail like nothing had happened. "Hey, it's me. Look, I know we haven't talked, but we're in kind of a situation. It's not a big deal, but the car thing got messy and we just need a little help covering the fine so we can get it back. Nothing crazy. Just need it done this week. I figured since you're doing well now, maybe you could spot us. Spot us. Like this was a lunch check. Like I hadn't been cut out of my own family's future to fund her failure. I didn't respond. She texted the next day, "Come on, it's just a car. Don't be petty. You have a daughter. You should get what it's like to need a little help." And that's when I called. Not to argue, just to end it. She picked up fast, all fake friendly again, like nothing ever happened, and I said, "You want help? Here's help. Learn to live within your means. You've been handed more than you ever earned in your life, and you still found a way to screw it up. You think you deserve more? You can't even maintain what you've already been given." And she started yelling, same old voice, all venom and drama. And I just said, "I don't owe you a car, or a conversation, or a damn thing," and I hung up, blocked the number, deleted the voicemail, and walked into the kitchen to finish cooking dinner with my daughter dancing in her pajamas and my wife humming along to music in the other room. And I realized I wasn't angry. I was just done. They were over there, still stuck in that same cycle, and I was finally out of it. Not above it, just out. A few more months passed after that last call with my sister, and for a while, everything stayed quiet. No more texts, no blocked calls, nothing. Just peace. And then, right before Christmas, my mom tried again. This time with a soft touch. She sent a card in the mail. No return address, but her handwriting was obvious. Inside, "We still think about you every day. Your father wants things to be good again. It's never too late to be a family." No apology. No acknowledgement, just nostalgia in cursive, and a picture of my sister's baby stapled to the inside like some emotional bait. I didn't respond. But 2 weeks later, she called again. And for some reason, I picked up. Maybe I was curious. Maybe I just wanted to hear her say something real. She didn't. It was the same performance. "Your father's tired. Your sister regrets how things went. We're all ready to move on." And I asked her, "Move on from what?" And she said, "From the misunderstanding." That was the moment I knew nothing had changed. I said, "It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a choice. You chose her, over and over, and expected me to smile and hand her the things I worked for." And she said, "We love you both." And I said, "No. You protected her. You used me." Silence. Then she tried the old guilt trip. "You don't even let your father see your daughter. That's cruel." And I said, "He stood by while you gave away my home, while she mocked my wife, while I was pushed out with a newborn. He didn't just stand by, he justified it." And she had nothing, just breathing. And then she said it, like it was a compromise. "Why don't you come home? Let's have dinner. No fighting, just talk." I said, "No. If he wants to talk, he can come here. Alone. Not with her. And not with any expectations." And then I said it, clearly, calmly. "If he walks into my home, looks me in the eye, and says, 'I was wrong. I'm sorry. You were treated unfairly,' then maybe we can move forward. Maybe." She snapped, then dropped the act, said I was being dramatic, cruel, holding the family hostage. "That forgiveness isn't about being right." And I said, "No. Forgiveness is about responsibility. And none of you want any." And then she said something I'll never forget. "You used to be such a good son. Like all this was my fall from grace." And I just said, "You're right. I used to be." And hung up. Since then, nothing. And that's been the best part. The space. The silence. The ability to live my life without being dragged into someone else's drama. I see pictures of them sometimes through mutuals. My sister still posts like she's an influencer, even though her life is held together with handouts and duct tape. My father looks tired. Older. Not like the man I remember growing up with, the one who lectured me about earning everything, about standing on your own feet. I wonder if he knows how far he let things fall. If he even realizes what he lost. I didn't leave them because I hated them. I left because I finally understood something I wish I'd learned a decade earlier. Love without boundaries isn't love. It's leverage. And I'm not giving mine up again. It's been a few years now. We bought a house. A real one, with a yard, a grill, and a mailbox with our name on it. Not something borrowed, not something held for later. Ours. We didn't rush. We saved, we planned, and when the time was right, we signed the papers, got the keys, and I walked through that front door carrying my daughter on one arm, my wife beside me, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I had arrived, like I wasn't living on borrowed space. We had another baby last year, a boy. He's loud and clingy and hilarious. My wife's on maternity leave again, but this time it's not chaos. We hired a nanny part-time, so she actually gets to rest, take care of herself, and enjoy the baby instead of drowning in exhaustion. We still work hard, but it's different now. We're not scraping by. We're building. My dad reached out once, just once, sent me a short email after the second baby was born. It said, "It's time to let the past go. Let's move forward as a family." I read it 3 times, thought about it for a day. Then I replied, "The past isn't something you let go. It's something you take responsibility for." I'm not holding a grudge. I'm holding a boundary. If you ever want to apologize, not forget, not sweep it away, but apologize, then maybe there's something to talk about. He never responded. And that's fine. The silence is better than the noise. I don't know what's going on with my sister these days. I assume she's still where she was, asking for more, spinning it like she deserves it. But that's no longer my story to track. What I do know is this: my kids won't grow up wondering why love comes with conditions. They won't question if fairness depends on who yells loudest. They'll know what it looks like to be supported, not used. Seen, not compared. I used to be afraid I'd become my father. Now I'm proud to say I became something else entirely. A man my kids can depend on. A man who doesn't confuse loyalty with silence. I didn't get revenge. I didn't get justice. I got free. And that's more than enough. And I sincerely wish this for you. Subscribe, hit the like button, and explore more fascinating stories.